If you're struggling with your vitality, energy, mood, focus, or sleep, this podcast is for you. Your host, Dr. Ann Sung, ER doctor and aerospace flight surgeon, will help you reach for the stars and remove the barriers or blockades that have been holding you back from living your best life. If you've been challenged by your health, relationships, or productivity, then it's time for a breakthrough. So here's your host, Dr. Ann Sung.
Hello, welcome to It's Not Rocket Science Show, and I am your host, Dr. Ann Sung. Today, I'd like to talk about how to increase your productivity by getting into flow state, the challenge and skill balance so that you can get yourself into flow state, and how to find your top 5 strengths with 2 different methods. There are some hidden strengths as well, and that plays a role in terms of balancing your challenge and your skills. So let's go ahead and dive in. And so I've been studying with Steve Kotler with the Flow Research Collective on how to increase flow state, those flow triggers, so that, when you're in flow where everything just seems easy, you don't think about yourself, and it's timeless. So what that means is like time just basically disappears. So that can happen when you are, say, drafting an awesome email, or if you're creating something, a project, or you can even be in flow state when you are dancing, where everything else just disappears, when you are at the gym, really into a workout, or when you're knitting or sewing. So all those are various types of flow states. And also there's something called group flow, which I'll talk about, maybe in future episodes, where you're just having an awesome conversation with a friend and you're sharing ideas and everything is flowing. The neurotransmitters are flooding into your brain. And it's a perfect condition for productivity. And because you have increased senses, you can make connections, you can recognize patterns because of the increased neurotransmitters. So there are various triggers of flow, and there's a psychological trigger. One of them I'm going to talk about today is the challenge and skills balance. So what that means is that in order to get yourself into flow state, you don't want the challenge to be way above your skills. You also don't want it to be way below your skills so that you're bored. And so you don't really focus, you're not really present in the task. Without focus, you can't get into flow. And so the sweet spot per Steve Kotler is that the challenge should be about 4% above your skill. So it's really hard to quantify, really what is 4%. But to me, I interpret it as, okay, it's just a little stretch above what you're used to. And to use that to assess, various aspects of your life, you can take a look at, your relationships, you can take a look at your work, like say if there is a meeting or if there's like a good project, is it actually challenging you, or do you feel like you're pretty bored? So that means that it's not going to put you in flow. Perhaps it's time to take on another project that's a little bit more challenging, or, expose yourself. Like to me, I like to expose myself to a simulation in training, but then I find that when in the simulation, when it has something to do with medical, I am in the zone, I am in flow. But when it has to do with other disciplines like communication or power or attitude control of the International Space Station, and sometimes those go over my head, and then I find that is way above my skills, and then my flow drops because I kind of get disheartened and I start losing focus because I can't keep up. So in order to figure out what is your challenge skills balance, well, the first thing is that you want to find out really what are your top 5 skills or strengths that you can work on. Because a lot of times we kind of have characteristics we know we're good at. Very few people know exactly what my top 5 strengths are that got me to this point. And there are hidden strengths as well. So I learned from Steve Kotler's course something really fantastic in order to kind of recognize what are the common themes of your top 5 strengths, because you probably have a lot of strengths, but what are really the top 5 that got you to the place where you are now? And then after we find the top 5, then we can begin stretching those top 5 strengths. Because can you imagine if you keep stretching each strength and you cycle them? So you stretch yourself 4% above your strength and then keep going, stretch yourself another 4% day after day after day. Can you imagine the exponential productivity you will have when you are playing all 5 of your strengths and elevating yourself nonstop? I mean, that is just going to be an incredible productivity and flow trigger as well. And so the way that Steve did it is that he had recommended to go ahead and think of your top 5 accomplishments. And then for each of those accomplishments, you will list 5 strengths that got you to accomplish that certain goal or a task, or 5 qualities of you. So that means that by the end of the 5, you should have 25 qualities or strengths that you have identified. And they can you'll see like the common themes come up, and essentially that's what you're doing. You will go through all 25 and you look at what are the top 5 that keep reoccurring, and then those are your top 5 strengths. And that's a lot easier in a way, to then I think to think about, okay, make a list of everything you're good at, but how do you know what are the top 5? And I think this is a fantastic way, a concrete way to actually look at your past accomplishments and identify those top 5 by finding the common themes. So for me, I like to share with you the exercise that I did, and I hope that this will kind of explain it a little bit better. Okay. So for me, my top accomplishment is essentially becoming a flight surgeon for NASA 14 years after I set that goal. I was in college when I set that goal, and finally I achieved that goal. And the 5 strengths I have identified for that is my persistence, my grit. I think I combine number 1, I combined a bunch into one, but it's basically the same thing. It's like persistence, grit, and then an inner drive not to fail. And number 2, I always took action on micro goals and long-term goals, no matter what, always taking the next step. Number 3, I was resourceful in networking and finding out information. So I would go online, look for aerospace medicine residency information. I would reach out to speak with one of the NASA flight surgeons to ask them how they did it. I would speak to astronauts. I went to any sort of volunteer events to have exposure. And number 4, I think I have a pleasant and positive personality and energy. And that definitely helps when you're interviewing and when you're trying to be hired. And then number 5 is huge. I have always believed in self-efficacy. So what that means is that I am empowered to do anything I want. I know I am in control of creating my future. So I think I can do anything I set my heart to. I cannot fail because there's no failure to me. Like if things don't turn out the way you want it to be, it's just a lesson. That a failure, it's a life lesson. So those were my top 5 for becoming a NASA flight surgeon. And moving on to the second accomplishment for me was launching this podcast. I mean, it took a year of, first having the idea, having that trigger. And then finally, a year later, I started the process of actually taking steps. And then now it's launching, and it's amazing to see the fruits of my labor. And number 1 strength is that I am detail oriented, because there are a lot of things that go into editing and also the website. Number 2, I have an incessant need to learn and always up level. So for each episode, if I am, I'm always asking for feedback for episode. And whenever I interview someone, I ask for feedback right after, or so that I can up level my future episodes, and learning about how to speak, how to look at the camera, how to structure the episode, and how to reach out for interviews. So those are all skills, and marketing too. Those are all skills to learn. Number 3, I am able to talk and connect with anyone. And I think that came from perhaps me being a physician. We in the ER, especially, we talk to everybody from all walks of life. And number 4, I have the courage to be authentic, because if I don't have the courage to put my words out there, my ideas out there, my thoughts, to share my vulnerabilities, then or to be out in public, this podcast would not have happened. And number 5, again, I always took the next step, because first thing is you have a call with somebody who can help you. The next step is, okay, you pick a color for your website, you pick a logo, you pick a name, you have to brainstorm marketing, but if you just think about everything that you have to do to create a website on the podcast, you're going to be overwhelmed. If you just take the next stepwise, eventually a year later, it'll be done. And so that was my number 2 accomplishment. That's launching the podcast. Number 3, what I selected was I went from zero knowledge in real estate to purchasing a 4-plex in 1 year. And I took action, essentially. I basically just asked my friend, that was the number 1 string. I took action. I asked my friend, what's the best real estate book? Read that book. There's no free lunch in real estate. Number 2, I found resources from semi-retired MD and took their Zero to Freedom real estate course. I think it's about 8-week course. And that just exponentially increased my knowledge in real estate and gave me the resources and the network too, and the whole tribe to help me. And then so there's resourcefulness in finding the right books, asking friends, finding the right team, reaching out to others. And then I took action in taking the course. And then also number 3, my strength is that I prioritize time in order to learn the knowledge. So I will wake up early morning or after a night and always listening, or if I'm walking, listening to the course. So I prioritize time to do it. Number 4, I have the ability to pivot with circumstances and not be emotional in the buy. So if I'm assessing a property or if I'm assessing a city, if it's not a good buy, I have an ability to really look at the cash on cash and tell myself, nope, this is not going to work. It's purely a numbers game. And if the numbers don't make sense, you don't have to be emotional about it. You cancel the contract. And then the last strength is that I have the courage to take risk. So it kind of goes along with taking the next step, but essentially you cannot really achieve a goal without some risk taking. You can't move forward and progress without it. So my first risk was that I put in an offer, and now it's not really a big deal. But at that time, I was so scared in making an offer. And after I took that, then the fear went away. And later on, it was very easy for me, if the numbers worked, put in an offer. This is just putting offers everywhere. And then when it came down to it, when the numbers really worked and everything worked out, after the due diligence and inspection, I took a risk and went from I don't even own a house. So not even owning a house to just buying a 4-unit apartment complex. So that 5th one, courage, was really huge for me. And then number 4, my 4th accomplishment is that I have summited Kilimanjaro and also did the 3 pass trek around Everest Base Camp in the Himalayas, and also climbed 3 other passes. And for me, the first strength is the confidence that I could do anything. I did the 3 pass trek when I was in medical school. I had never done a long trek before that, except for a Big Bend. And that was like an 18-mile one-day hike that killed me. But I was so confident I could do anything. I could prepare for anything. And I researched and I prepped for it. And number 2, I took action in booking the trip, and it was my graduation present for myself at the end of medical school. Number 3, I have the courage to face the challenges myself. So when I did my Everest Base Camp trek, I did it with my ex at the time. When I did Kilimanjaro, I was in my emergency medicine residency. I went by myself. I joined a group, a team to help me, but I was going there without anyone else. Because that's what I wanted to do, and no one wanted to come with me at the time, but I'm going to go do it regardless. Number 3, I was resourceful in finding the funds that I needed in order to fund the trip. And scheduling in terms of like having time in residency to do this and also in medical school. I remember that it took a lot of work, but in order to, to make the money, but when you have a goal, when you have a set amount you have to make, you'll get it done. And then the last strength is that I always took one step in front of the other. And I talk about micro steps. And this has never been truer physically and mentally as you're summiting these passes, and especially Kilimanjaro. And for me, Kilimanjaro was basically the ultimate analogy to how I approach life and what you can accomplish in life, because the last day of the summit of Kilimanjaro, you will start at midnight, and after 6 or 7 hours, you eventually get there. We started at midnight. It was the coldest I've ever experienced. I had 5 layers on top, including a down jacket, 3 layers in the bottom. And it was over 1,000+ meter climb that day. I believe it was 1,200 meters climb that day, just to summit. And that's how we started. We started with one step, the next step. There's small steps because of the incline, and you can't really see anything else in front of you because you have a headlamp, so you can't really see that far. You can only see the person in front of you, and there is a huge line with the other climbers, and you can kind of imagine your goal at the summit, but you can't really see the whole road and the whole journey. But all you can see, it's the next step. So you take it, and then you take it, and and then at a certain point, you were so cold. I remember I had like nasal congestion that wouldn't stop. There are people who just collapsed in front of me when we were super close to summit, just dropped in front of me. And hose froze, my camel bag. So couldn't have water midway. And I remember I wasn't sure when this was going to end. I wasn't sure if we're going to make it. And there are people who just collapse on the ground. And there are certain points where I would take one step and I would be so tired that I would have to catch my breath for at least like 5 to 10 seconds. That was at the very top. It's 5,895 meters, which is over 19,000 feet. And I had to rest. I was so tired. I was so fatigued. But I took the next step regardless. And eventually, the last 100 meters took a long time, but we got to the summit. And I think this really, I'm going on a side note here, but this is essentially what happens in all challenges in life or all of your goals in life. You just have to do the next thing. And no matter what, if you just do the next thing, the next step, you will be able to achieve a goal or complete a project that seemed as impossible as high as Kilimanjaro. And it's just like an incredible revelation to me. And even if you have to rest, just listen to your body, even if you have to take a break, but if you keep moving forward, you get to the summit. So that was one of the major strengths, is my ability to take one step after the other. And then going on to the next accomplishment, my fiance and I were able to take an 8-month around the world trip after my critical care fellowship. And the strengths that allowed us to do that was that, my ability to save money and work for whatever amount that I needed for the trip. And number 2, I have the courage to take risks and action for the present moment. Either I was going to go regardless with or without him. And it was awesome. And it was so brave of him to come with me. But I was going to go regardless of what happened or who was going to come with me, because that's what I wanted to do. And then I learned the next strength is I learned to pivot with the circumstances to traveling, which was a huge learning opportunity for me initially. Before that, I used to want to plan out a lot of things. And by the time we got to the end of the trip, we were booking Airbnbs like the same day, or hotels like the day before. It just didn't really matter anymore. And then also the other strength is that having the patience, understanding, and being able to compromise with each other. And the other strength is that I am detail oriented in terms of like logistic planning. So that definitely helped. And because I was on such a roll, I listed a 6th accomplishment because I was just so fired up. Our 6th accomplishment is that we have created such a magical wedding to be remembered for the rest of our lives. So my fiance and I went to Alaska and we took a helicopter and arranged helicopter rides for our guests to the Knik Glacier. We found a blue pool in the glacier, and that's where we had our ceremony near the blue pool. And the photos were just absolutely breathtaking. You're in the middle of a giant glacier. There's no one around you. And it was just unbelievable. And we didn't know if it was going to work out because, sometimes it's difficult to shuttle multiple guests back and forth. We had 2 helicopters going back and forth just to get the guests there. And the timeline was super tight. But we made it happen. And then after that, we drove 4 hours from Anchorage to Homer, and we rented out this mansion that was Disney themed for 3 days. And some of the guests stayed there. And it had the view of the glacier, the water. It had all these playrooms, like a Neverland playroom at the top. And it has a sauna, a wave pool. It has a Turkish bath, steam room. And it basically has entertainment. And we had a private chef as well who cooked us dinner, so we didn't have to leave anywhere. And there's like a huge yard out there just for you to view the glacier, and a kind of a observatory room for you to look at the bald eagles and otters. And so it was amazing. Essentially, the guests, it was also cheaper than most of the weddings too, because we didn't want to do a DJ because we didn't really need to. We had entertainment there. We didn't really have an open bar. I don't drink, and so people just brought their own liquor, whatever they wanted to drink. The major expense was the videographer, the photographer. The mansion basically could sleep like 20 people, so that saved on lodging as well. So we went against customs, we went against traditions. We were initially planning the wedding and we were stressed out because we were dreading the dances, like the cake and having to do seating charts, et cetera, et cetera. And then we just thought to ourselves, we're like, well, why are we doing all these things if we don't want to do it just because it's tradition? So one of the strengths is that we had the courage to go against customs, to go against traditions, say no to what we don't want to do, because life is too short to do something because it's what's always been done. And if you don't feel excited doing something, especially if it's your wedding or a big event, then why do it? Number 2, we had intention. We were able to set an intention, and we were able to envision what's possible and set our goals, because we were trying to decide to do the ceremony in a park where it's easy to access or at a glacier. And we thought about our intention. Our intention was to create a magical wedding experience that we will remember for the rest of our lives. So that made the choice super easy. And I was able to like envision how everything was going to play out. Well, I didn't envision how beautiful it was, but I envisioned kind of like the logistics, what it was going to be like, and the ability to keep various details in check and following up with the photographer, the videographer, et cetera, and not caring about what other people think. So fully embrace authenticity. This is what we want. This is how we feel. We want to do it outdoors in Alaska on a glacier, and we want to not have anything that's traditional about a wedding. We just want to have a giant fun vacation, and whoever wanted to come can come and join us. And I think everybody had such a blast. And the last strength is my ability to compromise with the loved one throughout the entire trip, because we took an RV trip beforehand as well, and before the actual ceremony, and then throughout the planning phase of the wedding. And it took a lot of patience, compromise, discussing our visions and goals. So again, those were my top 5 accomplishments. 6 accomplishments. Becoming a NASA flight surgeon 14 years after I set the goal, and also launching this podcast, it took about a year to have the ideas like floating, another year to actually taking action and finishing the product. Number 3, I went from zero knowledge in real estate to fourplex in a year. Number 4, I was able to summit Kilimanjaro and the Everest Base Camp, plus the 3 passes that took 19 days. And number 5, I was able to take my first mini retirement in an 8-month around the world trip and with my fiance, or now husband. And number 6, we were able, my husband and I, we created a magical wedding, a glacial wedding with a celebration in Peter Pan land at Homer, Alaska, and Anchorage, Alaska, with views of the beautiful nature around us. And after reviewing all of those, probably, I think it was about 30 strengths, the list of about 30 strengths, I boiled down to 5 of the common themes. Number 1, it was huge: courage to take risk, courage to be authentic and be myself, to share myself with my friends, my family. And so number 2, you want to have, well, I always have forward persistent action, taking micro steps. Number 3, I was a visionary of short-term and long-term goals. And number 4, I have extreme confidence in what I can do, what I believe, and self-efficacy. I can do anything I want. If I want to do it, I'll get it done. If I don't want to do it, I won't get it done. Number 5, I am resourceful in being able to network, or I'm not afraid to reach out to people I don't know. I will start asking around for books, for resources, for courses, search online, whatever. I am not afraid to basically expose myself out there, ask for help or coaching or what I want. And so after you have these 5 strengths, what you want to do is that I suggest, of course, going through the exercise, finding your 5 accomplishments. Then what you want to do is, you now know your top 5 strengths. You want to up it and increase your challenge a little bit more by 4 to 5%. So what does that mean? Well, you want to use that strength in a way that you've never used it before. You want to stretch it. So for me, what I've decided for myself is regarding the courage to take risk and be authentic. I'm going to start sharing myself and posting more on social media and being active in some of the mastermind group and sharing my input or sharing my journey. I haven't been Before this, I really haven't been consistent in posting and documenting the journey, because to me, it takes a while for me to post and write. So I haven't established a consistency. So that's what I'm going to begin doing. Number 2, in terms of taking persistent forward action, that kind of plays into my last goal. I want to start editing more videos and create posts on Instagram and Facebook story, I want to also make it fun, because if I just keep a schedule, maybe I'll do like a weekly post or a bi-weekly post. Eventually, I will be able to have enough audience to share this with, to build my brand. It's like summiting Kilimanjaro. You just start with one post and the next post and the next post and the next post. And then eventually you'll have a huge amount of content that you can share with other people and people can look back on. And number 3, in terms of my strength of being able to visualize long-term, short-term goals, I told myself that in order to stretch this goal, I'm going to dream bigger and stop the limitless thinking. Because I just think about sometimes, do I have time to do all this, or can I actually, get enough funds to become an multifamily apartment syndicator? So I am going to stop the limitless thinking. I'm going to visualize that end goal, and I'm going to work backwards into those micro steps that I always took, and it'll be easier that way. So that's how I'm going to stretch it. Now, number 4, my extreme confidence and self-efficacy, the knowing that I will be able to accomplish anything I set my heart to. I am going to stretch it, I think, by number 1, sharing this mentality with others, sharing it more with others. I think in the podcast is a way for me to do that. But in the past, I don't think I talked about it as much before or shared it with other people before, like how I got this drive. But I think for me to stretch this even further is to share it with others. And at the same time, because sometimes when I think I can do it, there's always like a little bit of like a thought in the back of my mind that can I do it? I know I can do anything, but do I have the time? Do I have the resources? Like it'll creep up every now and then. Doesn't do it all the time because I catch it. But I think my goal is to stretch this by decreasing that talk to fully embrace it, fully embrace that confidence, that energy. And number 5, me being resourceful. So I'm going to start reaching out for more podcast interviewees. I'm going to be reaching out for people to help me with marketing and hiring a virtual assistant to kind of help me through all this. I'm going to hire perhaps more coaches to help me through this, the experts in the field. So those are the 5 things I'm going to start doing to stretch myself. And I wanted to also share with you some of the hidden strengths. So those are fairly obvious that you identify yourself and then you dwindle them down, filter them, and now you're top 5. Sometimes we have these hidden strengths that we don't realize because it's been us for so long, and we don't really think that they're strengths because that's just who we are. And so I took a test called the High 5 test. That's high, HIGH, number 5, test.com. And I'll link this in the show notes too, to kind of find your hidden strengths. And I thought it was very interesting. I took this before I did this exercise with the 5 accomplishments. My 5 hidden strengths are that I am a timekeeper, but I changed it. In the test, it says timekeeper, but I changed it to time creator because I can always create more time for anything I want to do. Number 2, I'm an optimist, which is essentially, that's very true. I'm always looking at the bright side of things. I always think like I give people benefit of the doubt, patient the benefit of the doubt. I always feel like there's no failure. There are only lessons. And number 3, I'm a chameleon. So what that means is that I can pivot with any situation, which has been true as well. But it's just different to kind of put it into one word, what you are. And number 4, I'm a catalyst, which is absolutely true, which means that I take action. I basically spark action and spark things into motion. Number 5, I'm a coach, which is what I'm doing now. Essentially, I've been a coach as a physician. I'm a coach over the podcast, sharing what I've learned, even learning myself, the mindsets, the tricks, the tips, and the habits to change so I can up-level myself to teach it to others. So that was quite a bit. And I hope that it had given you some insight into how to identify your strengths. To summarize, we want to increase our productivity. We want to increase our flow. And one of those psychological triggers is to make sure you have the right challenge and skills balance. If you're bored and not in flow, that means perhaps your challenge, you don't have enough challenge, or that the challenge is way above your current skills. And to kind of go stepwise into how to identify your top strengths and to always keep up leveling and stretching your strengths, you will think about the 5 accomplishments that you've had in your life that you're very proud of. And then for each accomplishment, you list the 5 strengths or qualities that got you there. You look at the common themes. You should have 25. Look at the common themes, and then you identify the top 5 common strengths. And then you think of ways, how can I stretch my goal or use this strength in a different way that I have never used it before? Like if you are a public speaker and you have a courage in speaking in front of 100 people, then next you will change it so that you will be in the front of 1,000 people. And take the High 5 test. Again, that's HIGH number 5 test.com to kind of find your hidden strength or to find a word that can basically summarize your strength in a very succinct way. So I hope that this episode has been helpful for you, and you can even use the strengths and talk to your boss like, hey, this is what I'm good at, or talk to your colleagues and make sure that the work assignment plays to your strengths. So I think it's a very useful exercise. So I am so grateful for your time with me here today. And the links, everything I've talked about, the resources will be in the show notes at itsnotrocketscienceshow.com. Please subscribe and leave me a review so that I know how to improve this podcast for you, because I'm always looking to up-level myself. And, tell me, what kind of topics are you interested in? So again, remember, everything we need is already within us now. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review in iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a private VIP day for a health and life makeover with Dr. Ann Sung herself. Then be sure to head on over to itsnotrocketscienceshow.com and pick up your free gift from Dr. Sung. Then join us on the next episode.